A black woman buys a first-class seat. A white man steals it. What happens next? The plane doesn't just stop. The internet explodes. This isn't just a flight story. It's a lesson in quiet power. Watch what happens when calm turns unstoppable. It started with 5 words. Words that echoed louder than the jet engines warming up on the runway. "Ma'am, that's not your seat." Danielle Reed froze for a second as the sentence registered. Not the words themselves, but the tone. Dismissive, entitled. It wasn't the first time she'd heard it. Not in corporate boardrooms, not in investor meetings, and clearly, not in the sky either. Danielle, a black woman in her late 30s, wasn't new to discomfort disguised as confusion. As the CEO of a rising multi-million-dollar tech company, she was used to breaking ceilings and walking into rooms where her presence still startled people. But today was supposed to be simple. A routine first-class flight from Atlanta to San Francisco, seat 3A. Her favorite spot, window, spacious, quiet. She'd selected it weeks ago, just like she always did, just like she'd earned. She boarded the plane calmly, dressed in a sleek charcoal pantsuit, her hair in a low-twist bun, diamond studs in her ears, and a black leather laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She moved with quiet precision, checking the seat numbers as she walked down the aisle, offering polite nods to those already seated. But when she reached row 3, she stopped. There, comfortably sprawled in her seat, was a white man in a tailored navy blazer. He looked utterly at home, legs crossed, one arm on the armrest, sipping orange juice from the welcome tray, like he'd been there all morning. His phone was out, thumb scrolling, completely unbothered. Danielle double-checked the number overhead. 3A. She glanced at her boarding pass. Confirmed, no mistake. She gave a courteous smile and spoke with the kind of poise you learn after years of people questioning your authority. "Hi, I think this is my seat." He didn't even look up. Didn't break eye contact with his phone, just flicked his finger slightly as if shooing away a minor inconvenience. "I'm settled in now," he muttered. "You can take that one." He gestured lazily toward 3B, the middle seat, the one Danielle had intentionally avoided, the one she had paid double not to sit in. For a second, time slowed. Danielle stood frozen, not out of shock, but calculation. She was assessing, not the situation. No, that was clear. This was a man who saw a black woman and assumed, assistant, +1, definitely not the one who paid for first class. It wasn't the seat that offended her. It was the assumption that she didn't belong in it. She glanced around. No flight attendants in sight yet. Passengers were still boarding, overhead bins opening and slamming shut. She took a breath and tried again, tone just as calm, just as steady. "I'm sorry, but I reserved 3A window seat." The man finally looked at her, briefly, and raised an eyebrow as if this whole situation was some sort of minor annoyance. "Look, I already got my drink. I'm plugged in. We're both going to the same place. Just take that seat, all right?" His voice was louder this time. People nearby heard. Danielle felt their eyes, not in support, but in hesitation, like they were waiting to see if she'd cause a scene. But Danielle didn't move. Instead, she slowly opened her handbag and pulled out her phone. She tapped it once, camera on, recording. She didn't aim it directly at anyone. She just held it in her hand where it was visible, not as a threat, but as a witness. The man rolled his eyes. "Really? You're filming me? For what? Over a chair?" Still, Danielle said nothing. She simply held the phone steady and stood tall, her boarding pass still in hand. A few more moments passed before a flight attendant finally approached. Blonde hair, perfect smile, rushed energy. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, looking at Danielle. Not the man, not the person in the wrong seat. Danielle spoke slowly, carefully. "Yes, I paid for 3A. This gentleman is occupying it and refusing to move." The attendant looked down at the man, who shrugged. "I just asked her to take the middle seat. We're both in first class. She's making this a bigger deal than it is." The attendant's smile faltered, but only for a second. Then she turned to Danielle. "Ma'am, he's already seated. Would you mind taking another seat just for takeoff? We're running behind schedule." Danielle raised an eyebrow. Her voice didn't rise, but her words hit sharper than any shout. So you want me to accept the seat I specifically paid extra to avoid because it's more convenient for him? The flight attendant hesitated. A few passengers were now listening more openly. Someone 2 rows back took out their phone too. The air in the cabin shifted slightly, uneasy. The flight attendant's voice softened. It's just temporary. We'll sort it out after takeoff. Danielle didn't budge. Number, I'll wait to sit in the seat I paid for. That's when the attendant stepped away and muttered something into her walkie-talkie. 30 seconds later, the pilot's voice came through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a seating dispute, we will briefly return to the gate. Please remain seated. A chorus of groans followed. The man in Danielle's seat looked stunned. Wait, this is ridiculous, he said. She's overreacting. Danielle remained silent. The plane halted. Within minutes, airport security boarded. Calm, professional. They didn't yell. They didn't accuse. They simply walked to row 3. Sir, we need you to come with us, one officer said. We've reviewed the boarding assignments. The man looked around, embarrassed now. Are you serious? You're kicking me off the plane for this? Danielle raised the phone gently. I have the full exchange recorded, she said simply. That was the end of it. The man was escorted off, red-faced. Danielle finally sat in 3A, placed her bag neatly under the seat, and exhaled. A slow clap started near the back, then another, and another. But Danielle didn't smile. She wasn't here for applause. She just wanted what she had already paid for. As the engines restarted and the plane moved once more, Danielle looked out the window, focused, quiet, and unwavering. In a world that too often demanded that black women shrink, she had done the opposite, taken up her rightful space and done it without raising her voice. Danielle tried again, calm, composed, professional. The way a woman like her had been trained to be in a world that often punished directness when it came from her. She kept her voice even, her tone respectful, her expression unbothered. Sorry, but I reserved 3A. Window seat, she repeated. She wasn't angry, she wasn't flustered. She was just stating a fact, a simple one. A matter of logistics, a transaction, one she had completed weeks ago with her own credit card and confirmation email to prove it. The man let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. Not the sigh of someone caught in error, but of someone inconvenienced by being challenged. His words dripped with irritation. Look, I'm not moving. Talk to the attendant, he said dismissively, as if this was some hotel mix-up that could be brushed aside. As if she was a bother. Danielle stood a little straighter. Her voice never rose. She just nodded slightly and turned to get assistance, her heels clicking softly against the cabin floor as she walked toward the galley. A few rows back, passengers peeked over their newspapers, their earbuds still in, pretending not to watch, but watching. The flight attendant approached within moments, a young woman with glossy lipstick and a pinned-up bun, wearing the bright smile they're all trained to deliver, even under pressure. Danielle explained the situation plainly. She had paid for seat 3A, but someone else was in it. Her boarding pass still in her hand, she handed it over. The attendant barely glanced at it before walking over to the man. For a second, Danielle thought logic would prevail, that this would be resolved as swiftly as it started. But then the flight attendant turned back to her. Ma'am, he's already seated. Could you please take another seat just for takeoff? We're running late, the attendant said, still smiling, but her voice dipped in urgency. Danielle blinked. Not because she didn't understand, but because she suddenly understood everything. It wasn't about the ticket. It wasn't about the seat. It was about who looked like they belonged in it. The flight attendant hadn't even asked the man to move, hadn't even verified his seat number. She just wanted the situation to go away. Smooth takeoff. No drama. But at what cost? Danielle glanced around. Row 3 was silent. A few passengers now looked down. Others were quietly observing, sunglasses hiding expressions that said more than words could. She wasn't just dealing with one man anymore. She was dealing with a familiar pattern, one where compliance was expected from her and correction reserved for someone else. The air felt tighter somehow. Danielle wasn't angry. She wasn't shocked. If anything, she was disappointed, but not surprised. She looked down at her hands, smooth and still. No shaking, no clenching, just tired. Tired of having to decide whether to accept disrespect for the sake of convenience or stand her ground and be labeled difficult. The silence stretched. The tension hung. The man was now slouching deeper into the seat, emboldened, glancing at her like he'd won. And the attendant stood there waiting for Danielle to quietly comply, to be the bigger person, to keep the flight on time. But Danielle had done that before. Many times. Too many. Without saying a word, she reached into her designer handbag, pulled out her phone, and tapped the screen. The soft click of the camera starting to record was the only sound she made. She didn't hold it high, didn't aim it like a weapon. She just kept it low, angled casually, clearly visible. The recording wasn't for confrontation. It was for clarity, for accountability. The man noticed immediately and threw up his hands. "Oh, come on. Are you really filming me now? Over a seat?" His voice carried, louder now. More passengers turned their heads. A couple across the aisle frowned. The attendant's smile cracked just slightly. "Ma'am, is that really necessary?" she asked, her tone more clipped. Danielle looked her in the eye. "Is this really necessary?" she replied, voice firm but calm. "He's sitting in the wrong seat. I asked twice. He refused. I asked for help. You asked me to move. So yes, this is necessary." She didn't yell. She didn't make a scene. She let the logic of her words settle, unshaken. The man scoffed. "This is ridiculous. We're all going to the same place." Danielle turned her head slowly toward him. "That may be true," she said, "but we didn't pay the same price for the same experience. And only one of us is being told to settle." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of thoughts. Full of recognition. Full of quiet shifts in perception. The flight attendant excused herself to check something and disappeared down the aisle. The man rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath. Danielle didn't respond. She was still recording. And now a few other phones were out too. The plane was moving now, slowly taxiing toward the runway, the engines humming with quiet force, the cabin lights dimming to prepare for takeoff. But Danielle wasn't done. She pressed the call button again, deliberately. Her phone was still in hand, still recording, but now resting on her knee in full view. The same calm she'd carried since boarding hadn't left her face. When the flight attendant returned, Danielle spoke clearly but quietly, just enough for the nearby rows to hear. "I paid for 3A. I'd like to sit in 3A. Her tone didn't ask permission. It stated her right. The flight attendant hesitated, eyes flicking nervously between Danielle and the man still lounging in the seat. Now with his arms folded like a teenager being told to do chores. Without saying a word, the attendant leaned down, brought her walkie-talkie up to her lips, and mumbled something quickly into it. Danielle caught just a few words. Passenger refusal, not compliant, gate return requested. Then the attendant turned and disappeared toward the cockpit, leaving the tension hanging in the air like humidity before a storm. Danielle sat straight, phone still recording, as whispers rippled through nearby rows. Someone in 2D pulled out earbuds. Someone behind her muttered, "What's going on now?" And then the pilot's voice broke through the hush, calm but unmistakably serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a seating issue in the forward cabin. For safety and protocol, we'll be returning to the gate momentarily. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The groans started instantly, audible sighs, head shakes, passengers sinking into their seats with dramatic exasperation. But none of them were groaning about the man in the wrong seat. Their frustration, Danielle knew, would be directed at her for insisting on fairness, for not letting it go, for being difficult. She didn't flinch. She didn't offer a defense. She didn't explain herself to anyone. The man in her seat scoffed loudly, throwing up his hands. "Seriously?" he barked. "You did all this for a seat? You just had to make a big deal out of nothing?" Danielle looked at him, not with anger, not with hate, but with something colder, indifference. She didn't reply. She didn't give him the satisfaction of being the center of attention. She was still recording. Outside, the plane's momentum slowed, then stopped altogether. The shift was unmistakable. They weren't leaving. They were heading back. The man huffed again, slamming his head back into the headrest, muttering about lawsuits and social media, and these people under his breath, just loud enough for Danielle to hear, but not loud enough to be brave. The other passengers watched now, some pretending not to, others openly staring, phones in their laps, expressions caught between discomfort and curiosity. For many of them, this wasn't about policy, it was about perception. Danielle, sitting silently, composed and unmoved, was a contradiction. She didn't fit the stereotype of someone who made scenes. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She wasn't disrupting. She was simply refusing to accept being walked over. And that unsettled people more than any outburst could have. The cabin lights came on fully. A chime rang. The plane had returned to the gate. Moments later, 2 airport security officers boarded the aircraft. Not TSA, not police, but uniformed personnel nonetheless. They walked with intention, scanning the aisle as the flight attendant led them toward row 3. The lead officer, a tall man with a shaved head and clipboard in hand, stopped beside Danielle first. "Ma'am, are you the passenger who filed the seating dispute?" he asked. Danielle looked him in the eye. "Yes, I purchased seat 3A. That gentleman refused to move. I have it on video if necessary." She tilted her phone upward slightly. The man nodded, then turned to the white man still in the seat. "Sir, we need to verify your seat assignment. Can we see your boarding pass, please?" The man shifted in the seat, flustered. I tossed it already. What does it matter? I'm already seated." The officer was patient but firm. "Sir, without a boarding pass, we cannot verify your seat. We'll need you to step off the aircraft while we sort this out." The man turned red. "You're seriously asking me to leave the plane? Over her?" He pointed aggressively at Danielle. "She just wanted attention. She's recording everything. Probably gonna spin it into some viral video for clout." Danielle still didn't respond. The officer spoke again. "We're not making judgments. We're following airline protocol. Please gather your belongings and step off. You'll be rebooked if necessary." Murmurs floated through the cabin. A woman across the aisle whispered, "About time." Someone else quietly clapped once, then stopped. The man finally stood up, grabbing his briefcase and glaring at Danielle like she had just upended his life. Danielle watched him leave. Her face remained blank, not smug, not vengeful, just settled, as if this wasn't a victory, but a restoration of what was already hers. Once he was gone, the flight attendant returned, her voice softer now. "We apologize for the inconvenience, Ms. Reed. Please feel free to take your seat." Danielle stood, stepped into 3A, placed her bag beneath the seat in front of her, and sat down. She buckled her belt and ended the recording. Her phone screen went black. But the impact? It had only begun. The plane was quiet again, eerily so. Danielle felt the shift, not just of movement, but of awareness. People were no longer just watching her. They were recalibrating something internal. The quiet dignity she held wasn't dramatic, but it was disruptive in its own way. She had held her ground without raising her voice. She had defended herself without apology. And now, as the engines fired back up and the pilot re-announced the journey to San Francisco, Danielle leaned back in her seat, looked out the window, and exhaled. The sky ahead was clear, but she knew the story that had just taken place would ripple long after this flight landed. Somewhere in the world, a video would be uploaded, a headline would be written, a conversation would begin, and maybe, just maybe, the next time someone thought they could hijack someone else's space, they'd think again. A uniformed officer stepped onto the plane, flanked by a senior airline representative in a navy blazer and polished shoes, clipboard in hand. The cabin fell into a deeper silence, the kind that swells with anticipation when something unexpected is about to happen. Eyes tracked their every move as they walked calmly but purposefully toward row 3. The man in the window seat, Danielle's seat, shifted uncomfortably as they approached. The officer stopped directly beside him, glanced at the boarding pass roster, and spoke in a level but authoritative tone. "Sir, we need to speak with you off the plane." The man blinked, genuinely confused, mouth slightly open, as if the words hadn't fully registered. "Wait, me?" he said, voice rising with indignation. "Why me? I didn't do anything. I was just trying to help her." He jabbed a finger toward Danielle without looking at her, as if she were the problem, the cause, the disruption to his otherwise smooth day. "She made a scene. She refused to switch seats. She's filming me for no reason." His words poured out quickly, like a child caught with stolen candy, trying to spin the story before anyone checked the cameras. Danielle, still seated in the aisle row, didn't flinch. She didn't argue or explain. She simply unlocked her phone and tapped play. She held the screen up where both the officer and airline rep could see. The footage was short, but the message was clear. The man refusing to move, casually telling her to just take the middle, brushing her off like an inconvenience. The most damning part wasn't his entitlement, it was the flight attendant, politely asking Danielle to be the one who shifted, not the man who had taken what wasn't his. The officer watched the footage without a word, his face unreadable. The airline rep leaned in slightly, glancing between the screen and the man beside them. When the clip ended, the officer gave a subtle nod and turned back to the passenger. "Sir, please collect your belongings," the officer said simply, as if this were routine, a box to check before takeoff. The man's face flushed, red from embarrassment, frustration, or both. "You can't be serious," he snapped. "You're really kicking me off this flight? Because I didn't want to change seats? This is insane." He stood reluctantly, snatching his carry-on from under the seat, fumbling with the handle as it got caught on the base. "You've all lost your minds," he muttered under his breath, louder now, his voice echoing across the silent cabin. No one responded. No one defended him. No one said a word. He turned toward Danielle, as if waiting for her to gloat, to taunt him, to confirm the stereotype that had built up in his head. But she didn't. She didn't even look at him. She was too busy sliding into her rightful seat, 3A, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. As he was led down the aisle, his shoulders hunched, someone from the back of the plane slowly started clapping. A single, deliberate clap, then another. It wasn't raucous or sarcastic, it was affirming. A moment later, another passenger joined in, then another, and another. Soon the cabin filled with a ripple of polite applause, not just for Danielle, but for the moment itself, for justice done without shouting, for dignity standing its ground, for the quiet power of being right and staying composed. Danielle didn't smile. She didn't need to. She buckled her seatbelt, adjusted her bag, and looked straight ahead as the door closed and the engines once again began to hum beneath the plane. The flight attendant returned, noticeably quieter now, her voice more careful. "Ms. Reed, please let us know if there's anything you need during the flight." Danielle nodded once, not out of forgiveness, not out of spite, but as an acknowledgement of reality. Things were different now. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't shouted. But she had shifted the energy in the cabin, and maybe, just maybe, in a few minds. The passengers around her sat a little straighter, their glances lingering just a moment longer. Somewhere above them, thousands of feet in the sky, everything would look small. But here on this plane, in seat 3A, something big had just happened. Danielle reached for her book, flipped it open to the marked page, and read as if nothing happened. Because for her, this wasn't new. This wasn't rare. This was just one more time she'd had to hold the line where someone else would have been handed ease. But today, the line held. Today, the cameras rolled. And today, even if just for a moment, the world got to see it all. Certainly. Here's your final section expanded into approximately 1,000 words, written as 3 long, powerful paragraphs with no spacing. Designed for emotional impact, perfect pacing, and a YouTube storytelling vibe that resonates. Danielle didn't name the airline in her post. She didn't tag the staff. She didn't hashtag her pain or make a trending campaign out of what happened. She didn't cry on camera. She didn't yell. She didn't rant in frustration or try to stir outrage. She simply uploaded the 43-second clip that told the whole story without needing a single raised voice. A man sitting where he didn't belong. A woman politely insisting on what she'd paid for. A flight attendant choosing convenience over fairness. And then, the moment the uniformed officers walked on board and corrected the imbalance. That was it. No long explanation, no angry voiceover. Just a caption, typed in clean black text beneath the clip. Respect is not optional. It's reserved. Just like my seat. That single sentence did what a million comments couldn't. It didn't scream. It didn't beg. It simply stated the truth with quiet confidence. Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed over 8 million times. It was reposted by celebrities with millions of followers, actors, athletes, authors, CEOs from Fortune 500 companies weighed in, praising her composure. DEI experts wrote LinkedIn think pieces. Instagram flooded with reels dissecting what had happened. TikTok creators recreated the moment. Line for line, it had become more than a travel story. It was a masterclass in calm defiance, a case study in what dignity looks like under pressure. Journalists from CNN, Forbes, BBC, and the New York Times reached out for exclusive interviews. PR teams contacted her company. Requests poured in, podcasts, panels, brand deals, collaborations. But Danielle didn't answer any of them. Not because she didn't have something to say, but because she had already said it, on her own terms. She wasn't interested in the spotlight. She wasn't chasing likes. She wasn't going to become the face of some sudden movement that people would forget about a week later. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the airline was scrambling. A formal investigation was announced. A public apology was posted on their website and pinned across all their social channels. We take these matters seriously and are committed to ongoing training and accountability. The flight attendant who had asked Danielle to move, suspended pending investigation. The man who took her seat, identified by online sleuths within hours. Turns out he was a mid-level executive at a major consulting firm, a firm that prided itself on equity, diversity, and inclusion. After the backlash reached their boardroom, he was quietly removed from their team roster. The company's HR issued a brief statement. He is no longer with the company. No lawsuit, no spectacle, just accountability. Not because Danielle demanded it, but because the world saw what happened and demanded it for her. That was the difference. Danielle had done what so few ever get to do. Let the truth speak for itself, and it spoke loudly. But Danielle, she remained silent. No tweets, no videos, no interviews. She just went back to her life. CEO of a thriving tech company, investor in several startups, mentor to young women in tech. She kept flying. Same airline, same route, same class, same seat, 3A. She boarded flights like she always had. Composed, professional, unreadable. But something had changed. Now every time she stepped into the cabin, people noticed. Eyes followed her, not with judgment, but with recognition, quiet respect. There was always a moment, just a breath, where someone would shift in their seat or look twice or offer a slight nod. People remembered her, not because she made noise, but because she made sense. They remembered that she had taken up space without apology, that she didn't allow herself to be pushed aside, that she didn't trade justice for comfort. It wasn't just about a seat. It never was. It was about being seen, being heard, and most of all, being treated as if she belonged. Danielle had stood her ground by sitting down. She didn't rage, she didn't scream. She simply sat in the right place and waited for the world to adjust itself around her. And in that small act of resistance, she reminded millions of people that silence can be powerful. Stillness can be commanding, and dignity is unstoppable. Danielle never raised her voice, but the world heard her loud and clear. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not move. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe for more real stories that shake systems, not just seats.